Hey everybody, how's it going? This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza, and I'm joined by a very special guest co-host, Cody Tewmey. We'll get to a little bit of his intro in just a second, but I apologize for those of you who are tuning in late. At least my wife and my kid, because I thought I had things sorted out, and didn't quite happen that way. And but you should. A bit lucky because we maybe were thinking about taking a week off this week, and we didn't because Cody graciously came to the show, and it's great to have him back on. Cody, how have you been? How's your little one? What's new, my friend?
I'm doing well. My little one's currently being put to sleep as well, so you know how that is. Our little guys are pretty close to the same age, so cruising, babbling, trying to figure out life, getting teeth and crying and sleeping a little bit better than he was a couple months ago. So can't complain.
It's all the fun stuff
that we signed up for, right?
Now, right? Hashtag adult life, I guess, right? I mean,
dad problems.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to throw a disclaimer out to our listening audience. We have had a little bit of feedback in terms of our audio issues the past couple of weeks. We had cleaned those up over the past few months, really. In the last couple of episodes, there's been a couple of issues. Some of it has to do with Google Hangouts. Some of it has to do with hardware and all of that. We are remedying that as best as we can. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for sticking with the program and still downloading it. All of that. Appreciate it. Temporary issue. Hopefully it's not sticking up again tonight, but appreciate the feedback, and we're getting it sorted out. So, again, for those of you who are unaware, and I don't know how you couldn't be, because Cody has written some articles for Cincy Jungle, and he has a prominent following on Twitter because he is a draft analyst, and he's he's kind of just a pop culture fan. We are lucky to have a nice connection with both him and Joe Goodberry, both, draft gurus of sorts. And I want to get his take on a number of things in terms of the draft, where the Bengals could go and all this. We're going to rewind a little bit and not rehash many topics. But, Cody, you being a Bengals fan and you seeing a lot of things, you've lived in Cincinnati, you've seen the Marvin Lewis area, you've seen the ups and downs with that. What was your reaction when Marvin Lewis rejoined the Bengals after this weird thing going on in January, and then this supposed change in philosophy? And I think that's going to be a theme we're going to talk about throughout the show, but the change in philosophy and some of the things you may have seen in free agency and whatnot since his rehiring to point to that change.
Yeah, it's weird. Marvin always says, I see better than I hear, right? And if you had to rewind back to the day it happened, I kind of threw my hands up and decided, is this even worth my time and effort? And it was a tough pill to swallow, and I think most of it is that you don't really think there's going to be change when everything stays the same. However, I've done a pretty big 180 on the entire situation because of some of the things that have transpired since then. The Corti Glen trade seemed like something that made so much sense. Buffalo's trying to get up to get a QB. They have a left tackle that, they figured was expendable at the time based on Neon Dawkins playing well last year. And it just made sense. But I think until the trade actually happened, no one believed that was going to happen. And then came Pac-Man's option to be picked up. And even though it makes 100% sense not to pay Pac-Man $6 million, until that actually happened, I don't think I believed it wouldn't happen. And now you hear guys like Jeff Hobson, who we all know love Jeff, and but I think he's in a tough situation in the sense that he has to keep the message of the Bengals in mind when he's writing articles, right? And that makes him in a tough spot. But when you hear guys like Jeff Hobson talking about after the draft, they're going to have to quote unquote whack somebody to get cap room to extend Geno and Dunlap, you think there might be some actual changes. You've seen a trade. You've seen a guy's option not picked up that you haven't. They're talking about cutting guys like LaFell and maybe Michael Johnson. And these are just things they haven't done. And part of me wonders, from the day that Marvin got re-signed, I was just threw my hands up, was so done with this team. And since then, I'm wondering if this wasn't the best option as a fan that we could have had. And maybe Marvin, again, circa 2002 reboot, right? When was the last Marvin, Mike Brown weird press conference? 2000 or 2002? I forget.
Well, there was 2002, 2003 when he was introduced, and then there was obviously the 2010, 2011 weird situation.
2011, yeah. Sorry. Yes. But it's just like, it's almost like he got a little bit more then, and then now he's gotten more again. And I'm almost wondering if this was the best thing that could have happened to us in the long run, because it seems like Mike Brown is just completely out of decision-making things now. He didn't go to the owners' meeting, which he hasn't always gone, and they said it's because he had hip surgery and things like that. But for him to send a delegate to something like that, I think he's kind of figured out, and maybe Marvin's told him, look, dude, you got to get out of my way if you want to see a championship before you meet your untimely end. So, maybe that is it was a blessing in disguise. At first, I definitely was just so over that situation, because I think part of me was, if they lose those last two games, we're sitting at pick 5. We have a new coach, most likely, right? And we're talking about a new quarterback. And if you're a fan of a franchise and you're tired of what has happened, new coach, new quarterback, that gives you hope, right? And with the Marvin situation and some of the changes with the trades and the cuts and not picking up options and talking about having to let people go because of cost and playing the young guys, that's the kind of change that might actually get us over the hump, win a playoff game. So at first I was totally against it, but I've really come a 180 on that situation, and I'm here to see it out this year.
Yeah. So I'm curious both on your thoughts of Corti Glen, obviously the biggest, and not only figuratively but literally the biggest acquisition. Yeah, the biggest acquisition the Bengals made this offseason. He is a guy who should come in and start at left. Well, he will be starting else. A guy who had played well for an extended period of time with Buffalo. I'm curious your thoughts on that trade. And, I know, again, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, you cut your teeth in the draft and you pride yourself on, scouting prospects and all of that. I'm curious your scouting report on him, because he played both guard and tackle at Georgia in college, and he was a guy that, there were questions in terms of his ability and could he play left tackle in the NFL? Was he a right tackle? Was he a guard? That sort of thing. And he has played at a near Pro Bowl level when healthy at left tackle. So the Bengals swung a trade for him. I'm curious your thoughts now, both your thoughts on him as a prospect and what you've seen so far from him as a pro and what he could bring to the Bengals in 2018.
That's weird, right? At Georgia, he played left guard to Clint Bowling, who played left tackle. So they'll be flipped here, which is kind of ironic, right? But there is some chemistry of them playing together, which I think matters a lot in offensive line play. He's a bigger guy. He's got long reach, which is helpful. I think his numbers, Pro Football Focus wise, and his actual attributes will improve as a Bengal because of the quicker release that Andy has, how fast they like to get the pass out versus, at Buffalo, you had Tyrod Taylor most of the time, or another quarterback who may or may not be as skilled as Andy, who might have held the ball a little bit longer, and that makes it more difficult for a guy to pass block, right? Especially if you don't know. Now here, he's going to pretty much know, keep the guy to the outside, and Dalton will, stay in the pocket or come out of the front of the pocket if he's playing correctly. So him as a prospect coming out, I thought probably more he's a right tackle just because he's so big, but the NFL's changed so much now that you see speed coming off both sides. You see big guys coming off both sides. Teams will move those guys back around. So essentially just play your best player at left tackle if they're used to playing there. And he was used to the left side in college, so it makes sense that he went there and stuck. As far as the trade goes, obviously you think, oh, could they have gotten him cheaper? Could they, but really if you look at what they gave up for him, the spots they moved back plus the spots they moved up puts it around, if you're looking at trade value charts and what have you, somewhere around the mid-50s. So, in the mid-50s, are you going to get a player of his caliber? No. He signed to a contract that the Bengals would actually pay out. So you get 3 years of a proven player. You don't have to give him a new contract. At that point, if he walks and he's been playing well, you're definitely going to get a huge comp pick for him because left tackles, he's going to get paid, right? He's at, or, Pro Football Focus-wise, rated him a little bit better than Whitworth. I think he's got more upside because of his age for this team than, even if we had kept Whit for 2 more years, like you'd probably be looking at this being Whit's last year here. So you still have a problem at left tackle in a draft that's not full of left tackles. So the trade made so much sense because this draft, Mike McGlinchey is probably a reach at 12. Maybe he plays left tackle. He's probably for sure a solid right tackle, but there aren't any guys in this draft that you think like slam dunk left tackle. Like last year you had, Ronnie Stanley and those types of guys that you thought pretty good were going, you were pretty sure that they were going to come in and be a nice left tackle in the NFL. And you just don't see that this year. So I think the only thing that kind of worries me about the trade back is that they were right on the cusp of getting those elite talent players, depending on how many quarterbacks went in front of them. But at the same time, they could have been left there at 12 holding the bag, picking a guy, the same guy they'll end up with at 21. So I think it made sense. I think the value was pretty good. There were rumors of a mid-round or late-round pick for him, but when you have a need, you got to overpay a bit, right? You want to make sure that you get him and not somebody else. If they would have, I'm kind of glad, they didn't do like they did with A.J. McCarron and draw a line in the sand, and then it cost them a valuable trade that now looks like a complete tragedy, right? Because they're going to get maybe a 5th-round comp pick for him, which equates to a 6th-round value this year, and you had pick 33 in your hands and you wanted pick 33 and pick 70 or 90 or whatever. They were trying to get 2 picks. If they just take 33, that's done in the morning, and now they're staring at 3 picks in the top 46, and they can fix this team in 1 year. So I think I was proud of them for not standing their ground and maybe overpaying slightly, but getting what they felt was an asset that was at a salary they wanted to pay. And he fits the kind of scheme that Pollock's going to try to run, assuming he brings what he brings up here from Dallas, and he's played with bowling before, which I think is helpful too.
Yeah, and I think now the left side of the line is set. Center to the right side of the line has some question marks, and we're going to talk about that. I want to get your thoughts because I think, if I remember correctly, you were part of a live show, live draft.
I was.
Show, back in 2015 when the Bengals selected 2 offensive tackles.
I was.
Second round.
We had a 3rd-round grade on Cedric Ogbuehi, and now known as Cedric Olehi. The day they picked him, that's kind of where we had him, and you know, you got to make the best of it when you're on a live show, and you want people to not feel like it's the worst thing in the world. But yeah, we weren't too high on on that pick the day of, and you know, they say you can't grade a draft the day it happens, but you can have a pretty good idea that draft was going to be pretty bad when you looked at it afterwards. I mean, they reached for a guy like Bodine, and then a guy like Ryan Lindley. Lindley gets picked right after him, and actually is good. So, but yeah, I mean,
you know, I think our good friend Nick Stuberling, who hosted the other show and now hosts a Cincinnati. So if you're into the other form of football, go check that out. But I think he has a story, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. You guys were at Lachey's Bar in Cincinnati, downtown Cincinnati.
Correct.
And when they picked Ogbuehi, I think it was Nick Lachey himself who walked by you guys and just kind of shook his head and was like, "Oh man," right? Like he was not stoked on the Ogbuehi pick. And since he's been kind of correct, right?
Yeah, well, and so he had talked to us beforehand and kind of asked us our thoughts, and I guess he had gone up to Nick and was like, "Where did you guys get this guy? Like, he knows these dudes in and out." And he's like, he just writes for us, just likes to do it. It's pretty crazy because I think I called like the first 7 picks. I called them before they picked them, so he came up. So after they made the pick and went to commercial, and I kind of talked about it and talked about, you know, pros and cons and what have you about him. We kind of took a quick break, and that's when he kind of walked over and was like, "That was a terrible pick, wasn't it?" And we were kind of like, I was like, "Yeah, I don't think it was that good of a pick." And he's like, "I could just tell when it happened that it wasn't going to be good." So, but yeah, him and his brother were like, "Man, this is bad, isn't it?" And we're like, "Yeah, it's bad." So hindsight's 20/20 sometimes, but
right,
like we got that one right this time.
Right. So I want to talk about this, and then we're gonna talk about this year's draft and looking ahead and some other things as well. But obviously, when the Bengals made those picks for Ogbuehi and Fisher, they looked at Whitworth. Granted, he was playing at a high level, but he was aging. Andre Smith, aging and was kind of inconsistent. Had some great play, had some play. So you kind of said, well, you know, this is a team that consistently makes the playoffs. They can afford to plan for the future. And you know, Jake Fisher was a guy that was projected as a first-round pick. He fell to them in the late second round. So you kind of go, okay, they went best player available. Now, both guys have not played well. And now Corti Glen is on the left side and has supplanted both Fisher and Ogbuehi for that position by all intents and purposes. It would appear that Fisher, Ogbuehi, maybe some other guys they have on the roster are going to be duking it out for the right. They could add another tackle in this year's draft. We don't know, but I mean, are you confident based on years accrued, based on your scouting reports, are you confident in either Fisher or Ogbuehi manning the right side in 2018 now that said?
Well, I mean, what's weird is I thought that Fisher might be the pick when they picked Ogbuehi because we had kind of heard from the inside that they were really high on Fisher. So when he was still there in round 2, I was pretty sure that they might pick him. But I was also kind of like, I don't expect them to go offensive tackle back-to-back because I think their plan was get a tackle, and he either plays right tackle or left tackle, depending on if we move forward with Andre on the right or Witt on the left. You plug the guy in on the either spot, right? But yeah, I mean, I think for the right side, I feel pretty good about Fisher. I feel like he's the better prospect than Ogbuehi was from the get-go. I don't think the Bengals have really done him any service on how they've treated him. He comes in, plays a little bit of right tackle. They run him in gadget plays as a tight end. They stick him at guard. They have him snap some balls at center. And
yeah, he relieved Hewitt. He relieved Hewitt at H-back, remember?
Yeah, and it's like, okay, let the guy learn a skill. Like they talk about how hard it is to become an offensive lineman in the NFL and continuity, and the poor guy has been all over the map on the actual offensive line. He's played some left tackle, he backed up left tackle, then he played right tackle, then he played some guard, so they haven't really done him any favors as far as making his life easy. So I think with a year and this heart condition, who knows how much that was affecting him, because you think, well, the heart doesn't really change how he's aggressive and playing people, but who knows? Maybe because of his heart condition, he is fatiguing fast and he's not able to work out as much.
Exactly.
He's not able to stay in condition, or he's not able to lift as much. So I think a full season, I feel okay with him. I would actually say center's their biggest weakness, and then I would probably want a guy who can play right tackle or right guard. So two guys that come to mind. I think the ideal pick at 21, if he's there, is Isaiah Wynn. I really like him out of Georgia. He's a very solid player. He's not a mauler like Will Hernandez that everybody likes because he throws guys on his butt, but he's not as big as they normally would go for like a right tackle. I think he's only 6'3", 6'4", so they like him 6'6", but he's just solid. He's not great at everything, but he's really good at everything. So he's not going to make mistakes, which is what this offensive line needs. You need some guys that will be the grit and knock people on their butt and set the tone. But you also need guys that are just solid and aren't going to make mistakes. And he played left tackle at Georgia. So similar to Bowling, right? You'd swing him into a guard position, or he might be able to play right tackle. And the only reason that they would move him to guard is because he's got a little bit shorter arms and he's a little bit shorter guy. So that's why those guys get slid in. But there's nothing that says he can't play tackle in the NFL if he can play smart with his shorter hands, make early contact, be smart with his hands, and those types of things that he's good at. It's just hard to tell if that fully will translate to the NFL. But if you have a guy there that could swing and play right tackle or right guard, then he might be your right tackle of the future if Fisher fails, or you stick him in at guard if Fisher succeeds, and now you have a really good right guard, a good right tackle, a really good left guard, or at least a good left guard, and then if Corti plays well, a good left tackle. Now you've got 4 of your spots fixed. And this draft with the centers that James Daniels and Billy Price and Frank Ragnow. Now I would prefer Ragnow and James Daniels over Billy Price, and the Ohio State fans will light up the chat board and tell me about his heart and how much smart he is. And hey, Russell Bodine played hard. Russell Bodine had heart. Guess what? He didn't execute. And as a center, Billy Price is really good, and he's a strong power blocker, but sometimes he's too aggressive. And at the center position, we saw what happened sometimes when Bodine was too aggressive, right? He would miss a block, and then if your center misses his assignment, it blows the whole play up. If he doesn't execute it completely, it doesn't blow the whole play up. It may slow a big game, make a small game. But if you miss your assignment completely, Dalton or the running back has someone right on him instantly. So I prefer a guy like Ragnow, because Ragnow at the second level and his ability to block at the linebacker level is really good. And a guy like Joe Mixon, that's what you need, right? If everyone blocks correctly and Mixon gets through the line, and then your center or whoever's pulling can seal off the linebacker, now you have Mixon one-on-one with a safety or a corner. I like those odds. He can make a guy miss, he can run a guy over, and that's how you go from a 3-yard gain to a 50-yard touchdown. So I think their ideal rounds 1 and 2 for me would be like an Isaiah Wynn followed with a Frank Ragnow or Billy. I'll take Billy Price at 46. He's just not good enough to take at 21, in my opinion. So
I don't want to spoil it because I may or may not ask you for a few round Bengals mock. We'll see.
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
We'll see. But definitely those are guys that I want to talk about that you just mentioned, especially the interior linemen. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Kazenson. I'm joined by Cody Tewmey, good friend of CincyJungle.com, draft analyst, and you can find him on Twitter. I don't know the pronunciation, but it's
Kodakai is what my buddies called me in college. Kodakai.
Oh, Kodakai. Okay, Kodakai. So,
so I guess to go back what we're talking about, I feel more confident about the young guys at right guard probably in the long term, just holding that position down versus the right tackle position, even though Fisher might be a better prospect. He hasn't really shown as much as Westerman and Redmond played well in their short period of time last year. So I think that's where I would.
Yeah, they at the end of the season, they really put things together with duct tape and bubble gum, and they actually made it work. They ended the season pretty well with 2 straight wins. Obviously, they slid tackle. Christian Westerman finally got on the field, played left guard. You had Bodine still at center. You had Alex Redmond at right guard. That position was an L, both from a injury and roster standpoint and from what they allowed opposing defenses and right tackle spot.
With a guy like Westerman, they have their scapegoat, right? Like, you could never play him unless you fire the offensive line coach. Because if not, and you play him in year 3 and he looks good, what does that look like on a coaching staff? Why the hell hasn't he played the last 2 years, right?
Right.
So now they can say, oh, well, Paul didn't want to play him. Paul's the one who was working with them most recently or closely, right? So now you say, well, it was Paul that didn't want to play him. So if he plays well, then everybody, see, it was Paul.
Yeah. What is Paul Alexander not seeing that many others potentially? Yeah, totally.
Well,
totally,
at least
totally get you
covered as far as why didn't you evaluate this properly before? Why wasn't he playing already? You look bad as a coaching staff. Not that this coaching staff is worried about getting fired, but
yeah, there's a lot of heavily tenured people on this coaching staff, but they made some changes this offseason, including Paul Alexander, which was a biggie. He was a Mike Brown favorite. He was a Brown family favorite, and he did a lot of good things for the Bengals on the offensive line. He also made a lot of mistakes in terms of development, in terms of whatever you want to call it.
That whole draft. I mean, you got to think about that that you got the 2015 draft where he swings and misses twice at tackle, and then you've got Bodine, which supposedly he's the one that stood on the table saying we have to go get him. He's going to get picked, and then he's a failure. It's like, okay, so the last 5 guys you went out on a limb for haven't been good. Maybe it's a you problem.
Right. And I think that's where the Bengals kind of said, you know what, let's make this a mutual goodbye. Thanks for everything. And, we talked about this on the program before. You weren't on the episode, Cody, but it's kind of ironic that the Bengals hired Frank Pollock, who kind of was in a similar type of situation with the Cowboys. He wasn't really, to my knowledge, he wasn't really fired. His contract was up.
I think him and Jason Garrett kind of didn't get along, and he was kind of, I think it'd be better if you moved along. But I think one of the underlying things with Pollock too is why did he take this job, right? Why would you take this job if you're Frank Pollock? Part of me wants to think that he sees there's some big holes and he knows he's going to get some good draft picks. So if you're going to go somewhere, maybe you choose a place that guarantees you 2 picks in the top 100. Because then you can bring in at least 2 of your own guys. So I think part of their draft plan might be that, hey, 2 of those day 1 and day 2 picks are yours. Now, we're not guaranteeing you 21 and 46, but we say, hey, we've got 4 picks in the first 2 days. We will give you 2 of them if you come here. I obviously don't know.
Interesting.
But if you're him, it seems strange for him to suddenly pick this job right after he was fired and just agree without testing the waters elsewhere, unless there was something pretty sweet in that deal.
Yeah, interesting theory too. And obviously they may have flirted with the idea with him in the interview process of, hey, we're thinking about Corti Glen. Hey, you have two potential or two former first-round talents in Fisher and Abuehi to work with. You have Clint Bowling, a guy who's been a solid player. That there is talent there, so maybe that's what kind of lured him in. The Bengals have been, aside from the last 2 years, have been a competitive team, so it's not like he's going to a total rebuild type of situation. So, there's a lot of things there. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is our special guest, Cody Tewmey. I'm so glad he is able to join us, and we apologize for those of you who have joined us live tonight. We started a little late. There was a couple of issues that were beyond, really, it's my fault, beyond my control, and I apologize. And I thank Cody for his during this process. You can get this program on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on YouTube, at cincyjungle.com. You can also get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, theobinsider at gmail.com. We're going to try and get to some listener questions at the end of the show. Hopefully Cody can stick around at that point. If we can get some of those questions in, that would be awesome. Moving on from what's happened to what I ask you one more question of what's happened. And I want to get your thoughts on Preston Brown. The Bengals, now my thought is the Bengals don't like to enter a draft because they like to do quite often best player available by most standards. They don't like to enter a draft with absolute glaring needs, at least in these past few years. That's why they traded for Corti Glen. That's why they added Preston Brown, albeit on a one-year contract. They made a cut, Tyler Eifert, one-year contract, all that stuff. But Preston Brown, to me, very sound guy, a middle linebacker that played very well for the Bills, but not a spectacular player. Kind of a solid but not spectacular. Some people liken him to a slightly better Vinny Ray. Some people think he's going to be a very, very big difference maker for the Bengals defense that struggled last year in 2018. What do you think? And what did your scouting report tell you about him? Because he was a local guy. He went to Louisville, went to high school in Cincinnati, so I'm sure you're pretty familiar with him.
He had actually committed to University of Cincinnati and then decommitted when Brian Kelly left. And that's why he went to Louisville. So he was kind of supposed to play at Cincinnati, and then he changed when Brian Kelly went to Notre Dame. So, I think Preston Brown will make a big impact on the team, but maybe not in the way that people think. Vinny Ray was awful last year. He was a huge liability, right? So just playing him back in a more special teams role like he was before he started getting more snaps, and or Vinny Ray might get cut, depending on, I don't know his salary situation at this point, but he could be a casualty if a linebacker that they like is there early and they end up taking a guy early. But Preston Brown is kind of like a combination of Vinny Ray and what they wanted Kevin Minter to be. So he can eat up some snaps. He's not going to be great in coverage, but he's not going to be a huge liability. He's a sure tackler. But I think most importantly, what spurred this is that he obviously wanted to be here. He took a hometown discount and took a one-year deal because I think the market wasn't great for him on the long-term deals. He said he had a couple long-term deals, but none of them that, he said nothing that, so basically to me, he probably had some 2-year deals, maybe some 3-year deals that were essentially 1-year deals or 2-year deals that, they were going to have a lot of outs after the first year. So why not just play where you want to play for a year, and a place that the Bengals knew that Vontaze was going to be suspended. So they're probably like, you're going to start 4 games. Vontaze has a history of missing games. Nick Vigil hasn't been what we thought he would be. So he probably knew he was going to get a pretty good amount of snaps, and maybe in a more limited role, he can be a little bit more of an impact player, because he's not a guy that's going to get you sack fumbles. He's not a guy that's going to get you interceptions, but he's a guy that's going to put a hat on a hat in space and make the tackle. And And one of the biggest problems with this defense last year was when guys like Vinny Ray were in there, they missed wide open tackles and let drives. They let drives that were 3rd and 12, and guy gets a first down. I mean, that is a backbreaker, and they sometimes just need someone to make the tackle he's supposed to make. So I think he'll make a big impact, but not because he's going to make interceptions and sack fumbles and things like that. He's going to do his job. And I think that's probably why Marvin was probably pretty stoked about getting him. So as far as he goes, I don't think he's like some crazy talent. He's fairly athletic, but the thing with him is he's not going to make mistakes. And that is important to have. Again, like we talked about on the offensive line, you need some offensive linemen that can make some big plays and make some wow plays, but you also need guys that are just solid at doing their job, and he is that.
And let the other wow guys do their wow things, right? I mean, let him do his job, let the other wow guys do their wow things. And, he, like Vinny, made multiple linebacker positions in the NFL. That's obviously appealing to the Bengals. He led the NFL in tackles last season. That's got to be appealing. And to me, even though it's not, a superstar, probably not a Pro Bowl type of linebacker that was brought in to the Bengals, to me, this is a better signing than Kevin Minter. This is a better signing than Carlos Dansby. This is a better signing than Ray Malek. And I think, he's younger. You've got a rental deal on him, and he's proven to be productive, albeit not spectacular, like you and I have said. So I think that, this is a signing. Preston Brown is the signing that I think is, and I'm really, really glad you brought up the tackling issue, because a lot of times last year, especially when the Bengals, I think they ranked 30th against the run, which was very uncharacteristic for them. A lot of the times, the problem wasn't talent on the field. Yes, there were injuries. Vontaze Burfict, was out of the lineup, all that stuff. It really was guys evading the first and second tackles. And, whether it's running backs or a wide receiver getting a short pass and taking it further than they should have, it's really guys breaking tackles. And I think that Preston Brown will at least the hope is that he will help that, because he is a guy that did that in Buffalo, and it's not about, with his signing, to me, it's not about this is the cure-all to all issues, but it's a nice piece and a machine that needs to kind of be re-oiled, that was well-oiled. You got Carl Lawson now, who emerged. You have Geno Atkins, who is Geno Atkins still. Carlos done assistant last year, but still made quite a few big plays. You figure out the other defensive tackle spot. Vontaze Burfict's going to be out, but you can maybe get some creative options there. You've got talent at corner, even though Adam Jones isn't back. So, I think it's just a guy that plug-and-play starter, not spectacular, but a guy that is kind of a decent piece of the whole, right?
Yeah, he's a puzzle piece that can work with the group. Additionally, you're paying him about the same as you paid Minter and Dansby for their deals, but you got a younger player who's got more proven productivity. So, I think is a much better deal. And who's to say that if he doesn't start off the season, those first 4 games, and play great in Terrell Austin's system, they don't offer him a 3-year contract? Are they going to be against offering him? Because then they'll, quote unquote, know him, right? They'll be more familiar with him. And, who says they don't offer him 3 years, $15 million? And he says, cool, I still live here. I'll take a discount because I want to play for a decent team that I know is probably going to be in the playoff hunt most of my 3-year career here. I don't have to move. I'm going to get to play next to one of the best linebackers in the league a lot of the time. And if it ends up that he plays really well and Tez keeps missing games, that's the perfect scenario for them to have somebody who fills his spot. That's a capable. It's like A.J. McCarron was to Andy Dalton. Is A.J. as good as Andy Dalton? No. Is Preston Brown as good as Vontaze Burfict? No. Can he do a lot of the things that Burfict does? Yes. He does none of the wow things that Burfict does, but he does a lot of the things that Burfict does correctly, like being in the right spot, covering the guy he's supposed to be, filling the hole he's supposed to do. So he's almost the perfect cheap option to be there when Tez inevitably misses games, whether that be an injury, suspension, whatever it might be. And hopefully Tez doesn't miss games, but I mean, he's a linebacker in the NFL. They all miss games. It's a rough position to make it 16 games.
Yep.
Part of me prefers the fact that he's going to miss the first 4 games because he can't get hurt in the first 4 games. And I'll take 16 games out of him and make them games 14 through the Super Bowl, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. A special guest, Cody Tewmey. We thank him for joining us. We're talking about a myriad of topics, and we thank you for joining us live. We are on YouTube tuning in. There's a lot of Bengals fans that are conversing there, so join there and talk to some other Bengals fans. We're also live on CincyJungle.com. If you can't join us live, you can get the program on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and all of our content is on CincyJungle.com. Thanks so much for your support. We're going to be taking some, at least we hope, since we got a little bit of a late start, we're going to be taking some listener questions at the end of the program. So if you have some of those, leave those in the YouTube chat or the comment thread at CincyJungle.com. Cody, I want to let's talk about now looking ahead, okay? The Bengals have actually had a bit more of an active offseason than I think many had anticipated, including myself. Corti Glen seems to have solidified the offensive line a bit. Preston Brown seems to have solidified the linebacker core a bit. There's Baker, a defensive tackle who had some recent productive seasons. So they've kind of done some things that's like, hey, nice move. But now they kind of get to their bread and butter. They have 11 picks in this year's draft, thanks to their beloved compensatory pick formula. I want to ask you a series of questions on the draft, but I guess I want to start with, give me like 5 guys or less, if you 3 to 5 guys that are some of your favorites for a variety of reasons in this year's draft, whether it's an overall favorite, whether it's a favorite for the Bengals in terms of fit and positional need, or even, kind of a guy that's a sneaky, day 2, day 3 type of pick where you're like, hey, this is a guy that can come in and contribute in some capacity. Give me a small handful of some of your favorite guys in this year's draft.
Well, you've obviously got Isaiah Wynn. He's a guy that they could be there at pick 21. I kind of touched on him before. He's an offensive guard probably in the NFL, but may still be able to play right tackle or maybe even left tackle. Roquan Smith is the best linebacker in the class. He's the new breed of NFL linebacker. He can cover like no other linebacker. He still hits. He is so disciplined and so smart with his play diagnosis. He reads and reacts to plays very quickly, and his athleticism is crazy and allows him to do that. Another guy that I think they might have really high on their board, so I'll do a couple guys like that. So another guy is Chad Thomas. He's got that Bengals prototypical build for a defensive end. He might be a guy they are targeting to replace Michael Johnson. So I think if they draft Chad Thomas, Michael Johnson might get cut. And I think he's going to be available right around that time where they might be looking to draft that position. So I'd say he's probably going to end up somewhere in the late second, early third, maybe even late third. So I think if he's there at pick 100 when they pick, there's a real good chance that they're going to take him. Another guy that kind of has the build that they like, so a late round guy would be Jaylen Holmes. The Ohio State faithful will know him well. He was kind of behind the Bosa and then Bosa again, and then Tyquan Lewis and a myriad of other good defensive ends that they had there at Ohio State. So he never really got a ton of playing time, but he's got some athleticism. He's got a good build. So he's a guy they might look into. Another guy is Josh Sweat that I really like. He was the next Jadeveon Clowney when Clowney was in his draft. That was when Sweat was a high school senior. He had a really gruesome knee injury, like the Nick Chubb injury that we're all familiar with. Another one of those where they almost lose their leg and all kinds of that stuff. So he's been coming back, and he's had a couple injuries at Florida State as well. But the talent is off the charts if you can keep him healthy. And who's another? Oh, Nathan Shepard. Nathan Shepard, small school guy, played really well at the Senior Bowl. He's another 3-technique attacking defensive end or defensive tackle that could be Geno's backup and maybe his eventual replacement. He's from Humboldt State, I think. Small school guy, though. So those are some guys I really like. Who's a deep – at the tight end position, the guy I really like is Ian Thomas. I think he might end up going fourth round. I think that fourth round pick 12, I think is a good target spot for him. About 6'3", 200 and something. So he's not super huge, but a former basketball player, super athlete. Didn't really get into basketball until like his senior year at high school. And then he was ended up being recruited by small colleges, community colleges, and then transferred to Indiana. So really only has like one good year on tape. So I think that could cause him to slide. But he's a guy I think that could really develop into a good all-around tight end, which is kind of what this team needs. And he would have a year to sit because of the Eifert situation, bringing him back. Or if Eifert gets hurt again, then he's a guy that can be a little bit more of a playmaker than Croft is, but might be a good complement to him. So those are some guys that are kind of across the board that are some of my favorites and kind of throughout the different rounds. Obviously, Quentin Nelson's the best player in this draft, but he's going to be long gone. Same with Roquan's most likely long gone when they pick. Now, if they were still at 12, there's a chance he gets to that pick, but unless they trade up, that's not going to be something that they have. Let's see, other positions they might target. I think this draft class is so full of good running backs, they're foolish not to take one on day 3. Whether that is, it depends on, this team has to make a decision at running back. And that is going to be told by who they draft. And they're either going to have to draft another guy that fits the Gio and Joe Mixon role, and they're going to stay running out of shotgun and focus on guys that can play both in the run game and the passing game. Or they'll draft a guy that will replace Jeremy Hill's role, who's a bigger back that can be their short down guy, even though I think Joe Mixon can completely handle that role no problem. So just depends on what they want to do at that position. Some of the smaller guys, if they want to kind of stay with the mold they have, is Mark Walton, the guy from Miami. I really like him. He's got some good upside. He's had some injury issues throughout the process, so he hasn't really been able to raise his stock. So you might get some good value. And we all know the Bengals like some good value. I think they have to take a cornerback just to bring in some competition, even if they're going to bring Pac-Man back. So some guys I think they might target be like day 3 guys. So Holton Hill is a guy from Tennessee. He's had some baggage. I think pretty much anybody they go for in the cornerback class, they'll go for talent with baggage versus skill without baggage, right? Because
that's who they are.
Well, we know how they are, right? And they probably feel like that room is okay to bring in somebody because your cream at the top is so good in Will Jackson that you really might give the guy a year or 2 before he has to really play.
And you currently don't have Adam Jones in the room, right?
Right. So, I mean, those are some guys. I mean, some guys they've been linked to. Arden Key, his freshman year tape at LSU. If you would have freeze framed us 2 years ago and you said Arden Key's not going in the top 5, people would have been like, yeah, right. In his freshman year, he was absolutely insane he was like Carl Lawson on steroids at LSU. He was just all over the quarterback, every play in the backfield, wreaking havoc. And then he's had weight issues. He's had off the field. Like, I don't know there was any off the field, police arrest type of issues, but he left the team for a bit. He's had some personal leave and just kind of where's his head at, right? And the Bengals did have a personal meeting with him, so he may be on their radar if he slides, which probably will happen. So those are just some guys I think they might look into throughout the draft.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Arden Key visit. One of the kind of, it's been a little slower on the news front of late, but that was kind of something that I found very interesting. And, this program before, the Bengals have a smaller scouting staff than most teams. They rely on their coaches more for scouting than most teams do. So when they do a visit and they do an interview, they do an in-person deal, there's a little more stock to be taken into that than other teams. And if you remember last year, they showed some very heavy interest in Joe Mixon despite his issues. And, they visited with him. They did their due diligence there. And, since it's only been a year essentially, but since he joined the Bengals, he stayed out of trouble and was relatively productive as a rookie. So, when you see these reported visits, there is stock to be taken in that. It's not just like, they just met with some guy. A lot of times they do that because the limitations they perform under, the staff that is.
Sure.
They just, and those are the guys that they are essentially very interested in. I want to talk to you about two specific guys, I said this before we took the air. Cody was one of the very first guys that I can remember. And if you've paid attention to CincyJungle.com, if you paid attention to Twitter, Cody and I, for a couple of years, went to the NFLPA Bowl that was held in Los Angeles. He and I went and scouted the practices and the event itself and all of that. I remember, Cody, I didn't go this year, but I think it was the year before when you and I went. I remember you told me, hey, remember the name Roquan Smith, Georgia linebacker. The guy, I really have to give you credit because I was like, I don't know who that guy is. And obviously he was starting another year in college, and lo and behold, he is one of the best players in this year's draft. Now, most people think that he will not be available now. He could have been available at 12, like you said, had the Bengals stayed put. Most people believe he will not be available at 21 when the Bengals, where the Bengals are now picking in the Bills spot. So I've kind of got a couple of questions for you with him, okay? Number one, might there be some sort of unforeseen slide from him, and not because of who he is or his abilities, but really the position he plays? Middle linebacker, which is not really a premium position. We saw, now granted, a lot of people thought the Bengals would take him at number 9 last year. He fell all the way to the back end of the first round to the Niners, had a good season, but we all know now there are a number of issues following him, so that probably was causing him to slide. Smith does not have these issues. We have some comments in the YouTube chat about Roquan Smith, so I think just in general, I'd like to see your thoughts on him, his fit with the Bengals, the possibility of him falling to 21 based on his lack of positional value.
Yeah, so linebacker in the past has been one that always kind of slides, and I mean, for whatever reason, the NFL can't get out of their own way. I mean, a perfect example is some of us were laughing about on Twitter today is the Bengals took Marcus Hardison over Grady Jarrett, right? And Grady Jarrett played the position that they wanted Marcus Hardison to play, played it well in college, but he was a little bit shorter and less of a project upside. And so the NFL said, let's take this guy that might be better instead of this guy we know is good, right? So the same kind of thing happens with linebackers. They say, well, he might be great at linebacker, but we can get another guy a couple rounds later that'll be pretty good. And, linebackers don't make that much difference in the game. Well, Luke Kuechly, Navarro Bowman, and some of those great linebackers would agree to disagree, right? So the chances of him getting to 21, I would say, are slim to none, and Slim just left the building. But now the chances of him getting to 15 or 16, possible. So you could have a run on quarterbacks. Then you could have maybe a receiver goes and someone panics and goes receiver as well. Maybe the offensive line starts having a run, or the edge players, because the edge position essentially Bradley Chubb. Then everyone thinks there's a huge gap. Some people think Harold Landry's in that similar tier, but then there's a huge drop off, right? You got Marcus Davenport, who's kind of a big project, but then everything else is like project. So you could see like teams panic and say, well, if we don't get one of these guys, we're not going to get anything. We'll take the value later. So you could see them maybe getting to like the mid-teens. And at that point, if I'm the Bengals, I'm making some phone calls. Hey, what do we got to do to get up there? Because putting Roquan next to Vontaze Burfict is like,
it's silly. I mean, the thought of it is
can cover
it's
enough.
Silly.
Roquan can cover like a machine, and they both identify and diagnose the play so fast that it would be nearly impossible to run screenplays, and those kind of late developing plays just wouldn't happen because those guys would sniff them out, and it would really just make the middle of our field vacant because nobody would want to go over the middle because you're going to get thumped. And, quarterbacks aren't going to want to throw over the middle because both guys can make you pay. So him next to Vontaze would just be lights out as far as a linebacker core. And then you have a decent front seven, right? A really good front seven. That makes your back four their life a lot easier, where they can kind of make some more gambles and do those types of things. So Roquan next to Tez is just like Madden. It's like playing Madden and making Rams-style trades, right? The Rams are playing Madden. Everybody else is not playing Madden right now.
Right.
But, who knows if the Rams will work out. But they're pushing their chips in the center because they know their quarterback's on a rookie deal. But yeah, I think if he gets to the mid-teens, if I'm the Bengals, I'm making some phone calls. I'm trying to see, hey, give you next year's third or whatever and get up and get a top 5 talent. But I can't see him making it to them because you got Dallas in between them and there. Like Dallas could use a linebacker. You've got too many teams between those teams and 21 that just are going to have.
You cut out there for a second. You said Dallas. You said Dallas right there.
Dallas is at 19. They've got Sean Lee, but he's had injury history. Yeah. They would be all in if Roquan is there. You're going to have to get ahead of.
They did draft Jaylen Smith.
Yeah, but again, you want to pair those two together, then Smith doesn't have to do the coverage stuff, which with his knee issue, he's not as good at anymore, and he can just make tackles. So I think you try to get ahead of some of those teams if you can. If he makes it to the teams, I'm making phone calls.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You kind of say, picture and Smith next to each other. Burfict, not the quickest, but he does, as you mentioned, Cody, diagnose. He has a very high football IQ, despite what some may say because of his tackling issues and other things going on. Whereas Smith, yes, a physical player, a little smaller than Vontaze Burfict, but a far more sideline to sideline.
Yep.
But both guys could be, and both guys could be theoretically 3-down linebackers in a
new NFL.
That doesn't have, the teams don't employ a lot of 3-down linebackers and
safeties and 2 linebackers now. A lot of downs, right? So if you're them and you have those 2 guys and Nick Vigil's playing some snaps here or there, that's a pretty good situation to be in, right? And with Roquan sideline to sideline, and the thing with linebackers is like some guys are really fast but diagnosed slower, and Vontaze makes up for a bit of his lack of athleticism or speed because he diagnoses so split second. He can gain a half a step even though he loses a full step because of his speed. He's only half a step behind because he's so quick at diagnosing, which is probably why he's been able to play as well as he has, even as his athleticism drops off through age, as where guys that are live on their athleticism, their careers are shorter, right? Because when they can't diagnose as fast and move as fast, they start to be a liability. But yeah,
and you know,
is on another level as far as talent. He's a top 3 talent in this draft. But like you said, positional need will make him slide to probably 9, 10, 11, somewhere around there. But like I said, if he gets to 14, 15, I mean, you're foolish if you're the Bengals and you don't make a phone call and say, hey, 3rd round pick, 4th round pick, can we come up and get him? Because at that point, if the team's not taking him, we're thinking, okay, we probably have a pretty good idea of who the 3 people behind us are going to take. If our guy's still going to be there at 21, we'll take whatever we can get because it's a free pick for us, right?
Yeah, and I want to address one thing about that in just a second, but you almost wonder, and we've seen teams do this a couple of times, you almost wonder, if the Bengals, now that they're a little later in the draft, maybe they sit and see what Cleveland, who, by the way, has improved their football team,
yeah,
our team last year, but they have had they've made significant moves. Say, for instance, they draft Saquon Barkley. Okay, say that the Steelers, and I'm not, I don't know why I'm saying say, because they will have Le'Veon Bell this year. All of a sudden, you have 2 backs that are multidimensional, can do different things in the division that you are facing 4 games of your 16 in a critical division that you need to essentially win to get to the playoffs. All of a sudden, you're kind of like, well, crap. We drafted our wide receiver at number 9. We've got AJ Green. Maybe linebacker is the way to go. Now for Smith, I want to ask you, Cody, and this is gut feeling because you and I have been fans and have followed this team for a long time, and we know that they tend to sit on their hands. Now, there have been some signs of change, not overarching change, but the trade for Corti Glen was pretty eye-opening. The move for Preston Brown was, a solid move. They re-signed. They spent more money this offseason. It did more things than I thought they would. And I don't know about you. So you have 11 picks. This team, to me, though they haven't played well and haven't played well against some of the better teams in the NFL over the past couple of seasons where they've only won 13 and a half games if you count the tie, they're not that far off, right? I mean, I kind of feel like linebacker, offensive line, a couple pieces here and there, all of a sudden this is a pretty solid team once again if everybody stays healthy. So 11, you saw what they did, 11 picks last year. They used all of them. Granted, they moved back and they kind of got creative. They moved up, moved back, and they lost 1, gained 1. They still had 11 picks. They used all of them, and like 3 or 4 guys didn't make the team. Okay, now they have the same issue this year. Do you, in your gut, in your heart of hearts, do you think that this is a team that might actually, based on some of the things we saw this offseason, might move up if Roquan Smith is the guy that they really want and he's there in the early teens, mid-teens? Or if there's an offensive lineman that they want in that same area, instead of move back, get another pick and blah, 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 blah. I would rather see them be more aggressive. I just don't know if they'll do it. What do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, they really have about 8 picks, right? The last 3 picks have little to no draft value when it comes to their tradability and who you'll end up getting at that point. But, I think those 3 5th-round picks are pretty valuable, and they can move up and move down and move around. Now, consider this scenario. You like somebody in the 1st that makes it to 15. You trade your 1st and your 3rd comp pick, right, to get up to 15, say, and take Roquan, right? And the 2nd round, you've got your eye on whatever, X offensive lineman, but you've got 3 guys on your board that you like. So in the 2nd round, what if a team like Buffalo wants to come up, who's got 21 and 24 in the 2nd round, and you move back and gain your pick back that you lost? That's the type of stuff that you need to do. If you're going to move up, this team needs to move down at the end at another point, because they really don't have a lot of holes, but they have 5 are so big holes that they need to fill in the first, let's call it, with their first 4 rounds, right? They need to hit all 5 of those picks at positions of need. So if you burn one of them, it's smart to maybe move back and try to get one of them back. But I think they're going to move around. I feel like they kind of last year kind of got their feet wet into making some trades. And I think one of the stigmas with the Bengals that people have talked about in the past is that people don't call them because they don't make trades. So, that Mike Brown draws a line of stand and he won't move from it. So no one calls you because, they're going to call and say, what's your price? If they don't like it, they're just going to hang up because they know you're not going to change. But last year, them making some deals, maybe that opened teams' eyes to calling them and making deals. And now they made the deal for Corti Glen. Maybe teams will be more apt to call them. So I think they'll move around more. I think they'll use those. I would say they'll package 2 of those 5s at some point with another pick, whether that's to move up from the 4th into the late 3rd or move from the 3rd up to the mid-3rd to get a guy they really like. So I think they won't actually keep those 5ths. They'll probably burn 2 of them to move up in the 3rd or 4th. And then the last 3 picks will end up probably taking a kicker and some guy with baggage that's a receiver. Because I think they might take a receiver, but if they take a receiver, he's going to have to be a guy they have a first-round grade on him that's staring at him at 77. So they're not going to take him unless it's just a crazy value to them, because I feel like they've got to see what Ross and Malone can do for them.
Yeah, I'd like to see them be aggressive. And, unfortunately, sometimes it does blow up in your face, like the Russell Bodine thing where they moved up for him. They moved up for Brandon Wilson last year. Didn't really work out. And granted, he's a versatile guy that could do a lot of things for them. So still a future ahead for him. But, I think this is
you can't win a poker tournament by folding every hand. You can't lose a poker tournament, but you can lose one, right? So, at some point, you have to push your chips in and say, we're going for it.
Yep.
And I think that's what, as fans, we finally – if we heard today the Bengals traded their first-round pick, their second-round pick, and a third-round pick, and they're in the top 5, I'd be like, cool. And people are like, you gave up too much, whatever. Cool. There's somebody they want. They're going to go get them. I don't care. I want to see them try.
Because they never do it, and that means that they've committed to a specific player, and I get that, and I'd like to think they
would it end up being a smart move? Who knows? You'll never know until 5 years from now. But look at the 2015 draft. They could have traded all those picks and got up to the first pick and got one good player, and they'd have more good players than they do now.
Right, and I think this year needs to be quality over quantity. I think this year needs to be guys who are ready to contribute today and not necessarily a couple years down the road. I think, doesn't mean they have to start right now, but they are guys that are rotational guys and guys that exactly, can give you production today. And I think that
guys like Carl Lawson come in and get us some sacks.
Yep.
Come in and get us a pass, an interception. Be special guys that can make one area really good.
Absolutely. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is our good friend Cody Tewmey joining us. We started a little late, so we're going to keep going a little bit. I know Cody's got to get going in a little bit because I'm sure I'm going to be hearing about it. But I want to ask you a couple more things, and then I know there's a question or two from our list. But we've talked about Roquan Smith. I want to transition now to Orlando Brown, okay? Orlando Brown, obviously, his dad was in the NFL for a long time. Marvin Lewis knows him well. Orlando Brown was once thought of and was mocked to the Bengals in the first round. Awful combine. I mean, could have been argued that it was as bad or worse than Andre Smith's combine performance.
It was the worst combine in history.
Right.
By analytics numbers, it was the worst combine in history.
It was awful. It was awful. It was like he didn't even prepare. It's like his heart wasn't in it, and it's like the biggest job interview of your life. So that's a red flag. However,
it reminded me of the Step Brothers interviews.
Yeah.
Catch up.
Yeah. Pam. So big guy, good pedigree, played well in college. Now, we had Joe Goodberry on probably a month or two ago, and I asked him about him, and it sounded like Joe said he's more big and actually good and athletic. And that's maybe why some of these things showed up at the combine and all of that. He knows. I think based on issues and everything, if the Bengals have addressed linebacker and some other things in the first couple of picks, and all of a sudden Orlando Brown's sitting there in the third round, I would not mind them taking him. But I would not be comfortable taking him with a pick higher than that. Your thoughts on him, and if I'm crazy about being too hard on him?
So I'm sure if you follow the draft, Josh Norris and kind of the stuff he talks about. One of the things he talks about is like, where do they win, right? And that's the scary part with Orlando Brown is where does he win in college? Is that he just leans on guys, he overpowers guys that aren't as big as him, and he uses his huge wingspan to keep guys at bay. In the NFL, that's going to be difficult for him to do. Now, the thing as a Bengals fan that we should be very shook about is that until Orlando Brown gets picked, he is going to be a guy the Bengals will be looking at. Marvin Lewis has a storied history with their family, and he has not released that leash on them, and he's gone to his pro day, all types of things that point toward Marvin Lewis still being in on Orlando Brown. Do I think he's a guy that they might be able to get to play decent right tackle out of? Sure. Am I going to take him before pick 100? No. I think that for third round pick 100 is kind of where, it might be okay to take the risk on him, or maybe even that fourth round pick that's shortly thereafter. But other than that, I think it's just too early. I don't know that he'll ever be great, but he could be a poor man's version of Andre Smith, which at pick 100, that's a decent pick at a team that needs a right tackle.
Okay. And as we mentioned earlier in the episode, as of now, it appears that Fisher, maybe a couple other guys are going to be duking it out for the starting right tackle job. So, it's relatively open. It's a guy that Marvin Lewis has a connection to. If you've read things, if you've heard things, Marvin Lewis has basically known Orlando Brown, I guess, Jr., since he was born, because his father played with the Ravens and Browns. And I believe, if I remember correctly, his father was the guy that got a beanbag flag thrown into his face, and it temporarily blinded him, and he sued the NFL. Kind of a weird deal, but a good player nonetheless. And,
was that Corti Glen?
I thought Corti Glen was maybe the guy who passed away in practice. I don't know. I can't
remember.
I don't know.
It's definitely a Browns beanbag story.
I could be wrong, but I do remember that his father played in the NFL for quite some time. He has the same size, pretty similar skill set in terms of talent, but he's more big than good. Obviously, the combine performance he did improve quite a bit at Oklahoma, so that's a good sign. But like you, Cody, I think maybe if he's sitting there, kind of like what they did with P.J. Dawson, very productive career. There were question marks there. They had an extra pick at the end of the third round. Why not? And it's kind of a deal where if he can come in and play, awesome. If he can't, it's a late third round pick. Really not a huge deal. They have a couple of high picks on the roster already vying for a right tackle job. So, Cody, there is we're up against it. I know it's late on your end. Really quickly, give me because let's just say, let's not do trades and all that kind of stuff. If you can, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you can, give me a Bengals 3-round mock draft with, obviously, they have 4 picks. Give me kind of as an idea of maybe where the board falls, the Bengals needs, players who have been connected to them, maybe surprise picks, your kind of 3-round mock draft for the Bengals, if you have it, in front of you?
Ooh, I think the ideal scenario, or best case scenario, it would be like an Isaiah Wynn, Frank Ragnow for the first pick and second pick. Then you fix all the offensive line, and maybe pick 77, Malik Jefferson, a speedy linebacker from Texas if he's still there. And then the fourth pick, maybe Chad Thomas, the defensive end edge player from Miami who kind of fits the mold and will be a Michael Johnson replacement. So
I like it.
That would be kind of an ideal situation maybe, and realistic players that might be there. And that gives you kind of two filling spots on the defensive end. And maybe you don't go, let's see, another guy instead of Chad Thomas, if you want to go defensive tackle, maybe Nathan Shepard in that pick instead. He's another guy that would be a 3-tech that can back up Geno and fill that role. If they want to go tight end, or Equinemius St. Brown is a guy I really like. And it's just so hard to gauge what his draft grade. I could see him going in the first round. I could see him going in the third round, and I just don't know where he's going to go. Grades are all over the place on him because
he's the receiver from Notre Dame, correct?
Correct, yeah. He's a big receiver. He's got good production, but his production was down a little bit this year. And, a lot of that was probably due to quarterback play, but he's big and smooth, but he has some drops issues. So it just depends on, he's fast, but where a team's gonna put him on their board. Another guy, Mike Gesicki, is like Tyler Eifert light, and he's got that catch radius that Dalton loves, but not quite the route runner and seam player that Eifert is on tape. But I mean, he tested athletically like a freak. So. That's another guy that they probably would have to take at 46 to get him.
Yeah.
So,
that's a solid grouping of players there, and I don't think many people would debate that. I think obviously Will Hernandez is a guy that's in the discussion. Isaiah Wynn is a guy I really like, as well as Will Hernandez in terms of interior offensive line. Ragnow is another guy I like a lot. I worry about the injury. I do worry about a little bit of the tape in comparison to Daniels, the kid from I believe it was Iowa, right? I worry. Yeah, I just worry about the tape a little bit as well as the injury, and that's a position that you need now. You need even if the Bengals had kept, Russell Bodine even as a stopgap, you would need to draft someone for the future. But this isn't. They need a center.
Yeah. His ankle is a concern, and as long as that clears out, I think he's okay. He's a guy that's his floor is much safer than I think Billy Price, but his ceiling's not quite as high, maybe. That's why he's kind of a safe pick for them. So I think his second level play is really good. When you think about a Frank Pollack zone blocking wide zone scheme, your centers and your guards pull a lot. So you need him to be able to be athletic, which he had a good RAS score. If you follow the guy that does RAS scores on Twitter, it's kind of an athletic comparison score. It's relative athletic score. So it's basically against the other centers, how does he compare? And he had a really high score on that from his pro day results. And those are the types of guys that, can get out, and he's really good at blocking on the second level, which is getting seals on linebackers, which is why I like him. Now, he makes some mistakes like anybody, but he also has those kind of wow plays that can really get an offense going, where he just puts somebody on his keister and then goes to the next guy and does it again. That can really get your running back and your other linemen pumped. And we saw kind of how the offensive line talked about it in 2010, where they just ran the ball a ton, where they were just like, we just wanted to line up and knock people out of the way. When you got a guy at center that just starts blowing guys up, that can be a really big motivator to the rest of the team. So
I think I think you're right on the money.
I was assuming that Daniels won't make it to 46. I don't think he makes it past. I think the Vikings are a huge team that the Bengals have to be concerned about when these centers come off the board, because they took Elflein last year, who they like, but he played guard in college too. He can definitely play guard. So if they see a really good guard or a really good center, they could go to either and just move Elflein out.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right on the money, though, with interior offensive line, at least in the first two, if not first three picks, center and guard.
I think
obviously
the first four for sure will be interior offensive line.
I agree. Yep, and then you have a line and you have linebacker, whether it's a defensive tackle or edge rusher. I think that's all viable. Those are all viable picks, and I've said, and I think you'll kind of agree based on your picks there. This draft, as opposed, last draft was about flash with John Ross, Joe Mixon, Josh Malone, the speed, the talent, the skill positions. This draft's going to be more of the meat and potatoes, the big guys, the guys that you need to and all of that. Obviously, there is some age. All of a sudden, some of these guys, Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, AJ Green, Andy Dalton, some of these guys are getting a little up there in age that were once, so young, and now the Bengals need to
fail for 8 years in a row, right?
What happened is probably on the Bengals franchise crest. What happened? Couple of questions before we get out of here, Cody. I hope you have time for them. Number one, I don't want to go too deep into detail because I think this is a very divisive subject, but we've had some questions in the YouTube chat about Eric Reed, the safety from San Francisco. Talented guy, has had some ebbs and flows in terms of production and all of that with the 49ers. Obviously, when the Niners defense was at its best under Jim Harbaugh, and they were making, the championship games, the Super Bowl, all of that, Reed was a big part of that. A very insanely talented defense. Still made a lot of plays. He's now a free agent, and he's kind of coming out saying he thinks he's blackballed like his teammate Colin Kaepernick because he and Kaepernick knelt during the anthem. I don't want to go into the whole thing. I guess it's a little bit a part of the discussion. What about Eric Reed to the Bengals? And is this a team that can handle, I don't want to call it, but attention?
Yeah, and it's hard to say. The free agent market is very different than it was a few years ago with all these rookie contracts. Teams are kind of waiting till after the draft and say, hey, if they're not somebody we're really targeting, we'll just draft. And if the draft doesn't fall our way, then we'll call the guy and pay him. So, if he doesn't get signed within the first week after the draft, I think he might have a pretty good gripe about, not being allowed to play. But I think he should be on the Bengals' radar. If he wants to come in and play for a reasonable salary, and you can cut a guy like John Williams and save cap or whatever, just play all three of them. I think he's an option for them. And I think you have to look – I think it will be a telling sign, too, about his brother from Stanford, how he gets drafted, right? If he suddenly, slides to the third round, there might be the whole guilty by association.
Yeah.
They don't want to bring him in because it might bring other stuff when he's clearly a late first round, early second round talent. So I think the draft will kind of settle out where he ends up going, but I think he'll get signed. I don't think that's a problem. I think part of it is these guys want to get paid more than they want to get paid, than teams are willing to pay. So part of it is that too, So anyways, yeah, that's kind of – I think he should be a guy that the Bengals should target after the draft, depending on how the draft falls, because if they end up taking a safety early, then there's no sense.
Yeah, and it also, there's been a lot of talk, whether it's whatever you think about it, the Bengals have spent more in free agency than they expected. Well, whatever. But, if he's got a team – they had their sights on Kirk Coleman, a guy who made a lot of turn, again, one of those guys who was a good player but kind of surrounded by a lot of talent that on a defense. So, kind of a similar situation. And you have to look at scheme fit, though. And I think if you know anything about Terrell Lawson and you know anything about what the Bengals are trying to do, this offseason from 2 straight losing seasons is create more wow plays, more big plays, more turnovers. Carl Lawson had the 8.5 sacks, but didn't force a fumble on any of those sacks. So strip fumbles, need to get the interceptions, the pick sixes, all that kind of stuff. Maybe a guy like Reed provides that. I still don't know. It's not, I don't want to go so far into the thing.
Let's wait till like a week after the draft, and then.
Yeah. I don't know how well this locker room and how well this team can handle certain aspects of attention, bad or good. We've seen this team in areas and see this team. I said this a few weeks ago when someone asked about what about Colin Kaepernick now that A.J. McCarron's gone. I don't know if this team, a lot of other teams, whether you agree or disagree with what Kaepernick and Reed are doing, a lot of other teams are equipped to better handle these certain types of PR issues and things like that. I don't know that the Bengals have that infrastructure to be able to handle that. That's what I worry about. Now, a safety is a much lower profile position than a quarterback. So that definitely takes some heat off of the Bengals should they explore that. But you have to look at overall scheme fit. You have to look at cost, the entire thing. I think in theory, in terms of helping your football team, it's a good idea, but we'll see. The other question I want to add, Cody, and it kind of goes along with your recent kind of your little mini mock here is. I believe it was Peter Neefus in our live YouTube chat. In what round do you think the Bengals pick a backup quarterback? I think it's going to be mid-round. So you think fifth. So 5th round, who might be some of those guys? I like Luke Falk out of Washington State. I don't think he's going to be there in the 5th, though.
Perfect A.J. McCarron 2.0. Kevin White, the dude from Western Kentucky, he's got a bigger arm, maybe more upside. Logan Woodside, the guy from Toledo, is a guy that might be there later. Who else might they pick? They're going to be – they want somebody that's not going to push Dalton, to be quite honest.
Yeah, so that was my follow-up question.
Developmental guy that can just kind of sit back there and win some games if you need be. Let me look real quick at a list that I have here. Tanner Lee from Nebraska has got some upside, and Riley Ferguson. That's probably the guys that I think if they go a little bit early, maybe Kyle Oletta from Richmond. But I think the list Riley Ferguson from Memphis kind of has the mold, the size and stuff that they might want to go for. And then you got a guy like Tanner Lee who threw a lot of interceptions, was a highly recruited guy, but he's really had some issues with turnovers. But a guy like that has a big arm that you might be able to get in and let him learn from Dalton for a couple of years, might be a better upside backup than even A.J. McCarron. So those are some dudes, but that's kind of where they're probably at. I would say one of those 5th-round picks is going to end up being a quarterback.
You are convinced, unless someone absolutely falls into their laps, stay in the high end of the second round or whatever. Yeah, I don't either. Yeah, for better, for worse.
For worse, I don't think even at 46, Lamar Jackson standing at him, I can't see him do it. I could see them trading that pick so someone else could take him over them.
Yep, I agree. And you can debate the merits or demerits of that all you want, but that's yeah. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's Cody Tewmey. He was kind enough to join us and stick around after a late start because of my fault, and I apologize to the live listeners as well as you, Cody, for the late start. That was completely my fault. And but I think it's been a good show regardless. There's a lot of fun times coming up ahead with the Cincinnati Bengals because of the draft and how much stock they put into that. They've got 11 picks, and I think it's interesting, again, might not be the most sexy picks or the sexy names that we saw last year in terms of positions and all of that, but I think it's going to be things, guys that'll really help the team immediately and at positions that they really need help with, and hopefully that'll propel them back into their playoff ways. Cody, they can find you on Twitter at Kodikai, Codiki. you're going to be putting out more draft analysis, I know, as it comes out. Any other ways fans can reach you or get some of your content?
Yeah, I pretty much just use Twitter now with the adult life catching up to me. So mostly just Twitter. I'll probably do some player breakdowns. I'm planning on being at the draft since it's in Dallas and I'm in Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
So
Nice.
Planning on being there at least the night of. So maybe see some videos night of from the Jerry's world.
Well, I don't know quite yet. Last year, this program did a live draft show, but that was because the Bengals were picking in the top 10 a little bit earlier. I don't know that if we'll do one because it's going to be so late, at least as they're slated to pick. We'll see. But maybe we get in touch with you either on draft night from there or, shortly after that weekend, whatever, if you're available. We'd love to have you back on and talk about some of the Bengals picks and, talk about what they did over the weekend.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Awesome. You're the man, my friend. You can get this program on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, cincyjungle.com, or you can get in touch with the program on Twitter at BengalsOBI or the OBinsider@gmail.com. Thanks again to Cody Tewmey at Codikai, Codiki on Twitter. Go check him out. This has been another episode of the Orange and Black Insider. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for, again, sticking with us with a little bit of a late start. Appreciate it. Hope you all had a good Easter and or any other holiday you may be celebrating around this time of year. We'll talk to you soon. And I guess Houday, right?
Houday.